good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are, and welcome to Inferno 29. I am Eleonora Stoppino. I teach at the University of Illinois, where I'm a specialist of medieval and Renaissance literature. And I am quite happy to be here today with Alice Balestrino.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alice Balestrino, PhD student in Italian studies at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I work on 20th and 21st century literature, particularly on themes of contagion and the reconfiguration of biopolitical boundaries in times of crisis. And I'm very happy to be here today discussing Canto 29. And thank you, Professor Stoppino, for this opportunity.
It is truly a pleasure to be here, also because Alice and I started our conversations on this canto and Canto 30, in particular during a very momentous class on Dante in the spring of 2020, as the pandemic was hitting us. And so we have been keenly aware of the contacts between these cantos on contagion and our current situation. And the focus of our conversation today is going to be precisely the element, the theme of contagion and the boundary human, non-human that the theme of contagion allows us to explore, that Dante perhaps forces us to explore here in Canto 29. You remember that Dante and Virgil are entering the last pocket of the eighth circle, which is divided into 10 evil pockets, the 10 malebolge, where the fraudulent sinners are grouped. We have just seen the bolgia of the source of discord containing the prophet Muhammad, and contrapasso has just been defined for us by Bertrand de Born. The final pocket is reserved to the falsifiers, those who falsified either nature or their person, either coins or words. There are 4 kinds of sinners Dante, the author, presents to us among falsifiers: alchemists, impersonators, coin falsifiers, the counterfeiters, and false witnesses. The importance of the dichotomy surface-substance, as we are going to see, is communicated through great insistence for these punished souls on the skin. And from this manuscript at the Bodleian Library, we picked this illumination because it focuses precisely on this material boundary-like quality of the skin. And to come to our first quotation from the text, our first 2 quotations, the text, the canto begins immediately with a vision of pain and suffering, and the place is described as a hospital, using specific knowledge of specific places famous in the peninsula and around it for their healing structures and practices. La molta gente e le diverse piaghe avean le luci mie sì inebriate che dello stare a piangere eran vaghe. Quando noi fummo sor l'ultima chiostra di malebolge, sì che i suoi conversi potean parere alla veduta nostra, lamenti saettaron me diversi, che di pietà ferrati avean gli strali, ond'io gli orecchi con le man copersi. Qual dolor fora se dagli spedali di Val di Chiana tra luglio e il settembre e di Maremma e di Sardigna i mali fossero in una fossa tutti in sembre, tale era quivi, e tal puzzo n'usciva, qual suo venir delle marcite membre.
Yes, here we are at the very beginning of Canto 29, and then introduces us into a dimension that spurs deeply felt bodily reactions. Dante is moved by the wounds and the human suffering he is sort of vicariously experiencing in the final cloister of the Malebolge. It is also a multisensorial dimension. Note the references to sight, luci, la veduta nostra, to hearing, gli orecchi con le man copersi, and to smell, tal puzzo. The tone shifts in line 46, where we read an analogy pertaining to the semantics of medicine that will be further later on, as we will see, and is referred to specific geographical areas, as Professor Stoppino was saying, but malaria was particularly common in Dante's epoch over particular times of the year. Gli spedali di Val di Chiana, tra luglio e il settembre, e di Maremma e di Sardegna. This simile may be read as a counterpoint to the image of wars and battles employed in the previous canto. And it relates the themes of illness and contagion to our world, to the real world, where before describing them as instances of the contrappasso in what follows. For example, in the following quotation, we see how the theme of contagion is posited within the realm of classics, so from real world to literature, and how it is transposed into the form of a cross-species transmission. Non credo che a veder maggior tristizia fosse in Egina il popol tutto infermo, quando fu l'aere sì pien di malizia che gli animali, infino al picciol vermo, cascaron tutti, e poi le genti antiche, secondo che i poeti hanno per fermo, si ristorar di seme di formiche, che era veder per quella oscura valle languirli spiriti per diverse biche.
Thank you, Alice. It is often noted that Dante uses two sets of epidemic knowledge for this episode. One is a contemporary presence of medical structures for the healing of the bodies that we just saw, and the other is Ovid's description in the Metamorphoses of the plague that hit the island of Aegina, which Dante renders as we just heard. And we can note the element of the aere pien di malizia, which makes us think immediately of the Galenic theory of humor and contagion through air, the miasma theory. Also, we notice the seme di formiche, the term seed used for the eggs of the ants, and so this delving into the non-human element, and the change Dante makes to Ovid's text, the picciol vermo. He introduces this term worm, literally. Dante's setting of the scene then places us squarely in the realm of contagion. The plague of Aegina frames the episode of Canto 29 in such terms, and additionally, it provides us with an important clue on the perception of illness spreading. For Dante, in Ovid, the smallest of beings seems to be immune to the contagion, and these beings are therefore the beginning of new life. This immunitarian theory in its inception, this immunitarian theory of the smallest is particularly interesting if we think of the conception a thinker like Girolamo Fracastoro will propose in the 16th century in his mostly failed attempt to counter Galenic theory. Fracastoro will speak of seminaria, minuscule particles that carry the contagion. The contagious simile informs our reading of the actual sinners and their punishment. We could observe, in fact, that all four categories of sinners, except for the last one, are affected by contagious ailments. The alchemists, those who falsified nature, have a skin condition. The impersonators have possibly rabies, or their description is strongly informed by the presence of the lexicon of rabies. The false witnesses have a contagious fever, and the counterfeiters have dropsy, and we will talk about this later. The sinner's non-human qualities are easy to see. Io vidi due sedere a sé poggiati, come a scaldar si poggia teghia a teghia, dal capo ai piedi di schianza macolati. E non vidi giammai menare streghia ragazzo aspettato dal segnorso, colui che malvolentier veglia, come ciascun menava spesso il morso dell'unghie sopra sé per la gran rabbia del pizzicor, che non ha più soccorso. E si traevan giù l'unghie la scabbia, come coltel di scardova le scaglie, o d'altro pesce che più larghe l'abbia.
In this passage, the vocabulary pertaining to medicine is enriched by terms defining specific diseases, but it's also countered by low register words that refer to body parts as if they belonged to animals. Il morso dell'unghie, l'unghie, la scabbia. So here we have the medical term, come coltel di scardova le scaglie o d'altro pesce. This stylistic choice suggests that the dannati in Canto 29 are torn between a more sophisticated and then human dimension represented by these cultured references to medical terms, and a more vulgar one that portrays them as non-human, as animal-like. Contagion has turned the sinners not only into ammalati, but also into humans with a beastly behavior. The metamorphosis manifests itself first in their appearance, di schianze maculate, and then in their psyche. Ciascun menava spesso il morso dell'unghie sopra sé per la gran rabbia del pizzicor. Rabbia, here rhyming with another disease, scabbia, is a particularly important word in the ecology of this canto, and it returns again in the following quotation that we will look at in the adjective rabbioso. Ma né di Tebe furie, né troiane, si veder mai in alcun tanto crude, non punger bestie, nonché membra umane. Quand'io vidi in due ombre smorte e nude, che mordendo correvan di quel modo che il porco quando del porcil si schiude. L'una giunse a capocchio, e sul nodo del collo la sannò, sì che tirando, grattare gli fece il ventre al fondo sodo. E l'aretin che rimase, tremando, mi disse: quel folletto è Gianni Schicchi e va rabbioso altrui così conciando.
The human-non-human distinction in this scene is thematized from the first tercet, and the two souls are animalized with the use of pigs, beasts well known to medieval Italians for their eerie ability to be made sick by humans, as we remember Boccaccio describes in the introduction to the Decameron, but also for their similarity to humans. The soul, assannò, literally set its tusks, azzannò. The vocabulary is consistently animalistic, and as Alice was pointing out, it does point in the direction of rabies. The terms rabbia, rabbioso appear 6 times in these 2 cantos, and only once, if I am correct, to refer to a soul who's not an impersonator. So even though rabbia is also the less marked term for rage, it seems plausible that the contrappasso, the fitting punishment Dante has devised for his impersonators, is the nature-changing illness that, as is known from ancient times, comes from non-human contact or contagion. Rabies and its ability to cross border between species were well known throughout the Middle Ages, and classical medical sources such as Pliny the Elder and Caecilius Aurelianus, among others, had left a wealth of prescriptions on how to prevent this contagion precisely by a sort of reinsertion of the non-human into the human. The final and most famous sinner of this set of cantos and of Canto 29, Master Adam, apparently has nothing to do with animals or contagion. He's plagued by dropsy, a terrible bloating of the body coupled with insufferable and unsatiable thirst. And our manuscript here portrays Master Adam in this lute-like way. One could argue that some elements, the obsession with water, the impossibility to drink, may be connected with the well-known hydrophobia prompted by rabies, but this is a discussion for another time. We still remain with our question about the special connection between non-human animals and contagion in these cantos, the link between these sinners and dehumanization. And the answer is likely in the nature of their sin. They're falsified, distorted, reproduced, faked. And so as Capocchio will say, you will recall how good an ape I was of nature in this nature distorting practice they brought upon them, the distortion and fall into the non-human. And as a way of conclusion, we are moving to our next quotation, which is Dante, the character, asking the souls to speak to him and to return his plea. Se la vostra memoria non si involi nel primo mondo dall'umane menti, ma se ella viva sotto molti soli, ditemi chi voi siete e di che genti. La vostra sconcia e fastidiosa pena di palesarvi a me non vi spaventi.
We are moving towards the end of the canto, and this last quote we chose signals a sort of counter transition from the animality we looked before back to humanity. The grotesque sight of the ammalati doesn't prevent Dante from asking them about their terrestrial life, though he stresses the fact that they may have lost their umanimenti because of the terrible symptoms and the animal-like condition they are experiencing. The reference to memory and to human minds, as well as Dante's request that they introduce themselves and the families they belonged to, as they would have done on Earth, clashes with the previous depictions of the ammalati, the sinners, as animals with a beastly behavior. Because despite their non-human appearance, Dante addresses them as peers. The dehumanizing and animalizing effects of illness cannot wipe out the soul's past as human beings. And this is the dimension Dante is interested in inquiring, almost overlooking their present status. In other words, in the sinners affected by scabies or leprosy, furiously scratching themselves with their claws, there remains a trace of humanity, a remnant that Dante recognizes, a remnant that illness cannot entirely erase. I would like to conclude on a note about Dante's exhortation, la vostra sconcia e fastidiosa pena di palesarvi a me non vi spaventi, that seems to be particularly relevant for us living in pandemic times. There is an invitation not to fear our present condition and to hold on instead to our human side, to our umanimenti. And in this sense, we can turn to Dante and his harsh but not desperate, as not without hope rendition of illness, without fearing to read and understand our present reality in Canto 29. This exhortation not to be afraid of entering into a dialogue with Dante, despite or maybe because of our fastidiosa pena, and to present it to him, addresses us directly in 2021.
Thank you, Alice. I couldn't think of a better way to end our discussion and our presentation of Canto 29. I completely agree with you. And I just want to say that it was a great pleasure to discuss this canto with you. And I want to say to everyone, I hope you enjoyed our reading of Canto 29 and hope to see you soon. Arrivederci. Grazie.
Thank you, Professor Stoppino. It was a great pleasure discussing this astonishingly contemporary canto. And
grazie, arrivederci.
Goodbye. Arrivederci.